The church bells echoed across the narrow streets of Intramuros, their sound melting into the golden air of a Manila morning. Inside the centuries-old chapel, sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting soft colors over the bride's trembling hands. Isabel Cruz adjusted her veil, feeling her pulse hammer beneath the silk. It was her wedding day, the one she had dreamed of since she was a little girl watching telenovelas about love that conquered oceans. Her reflection in the mirror looked like someone else, radiant, fragile, and terrified all at once. Behind her, the bridesmaids whispered, fussing with flowers. Isabel's heart floated somewhere between joy and disbelief. After all the video calls, the long-distance promises, the nights staring at Daniel's name glowing on her phone, he was finally here, waiting at the altar. Daniel Hart stood tall among the guests, the perfect image of confidence. His gray suit clung neatly to his athletic frame, and his foreign accent charmed everyone he spoke to. He smiled as Isabel walked toward him, that easy, practiced smile she had fallen in love with months ago. She didn't notice the faint tension in his eyes, nor the way he kept glancing at his phone before the ceremony began. As Father Lorenzo began the vows, Isabel's hands trembled. "Do you take this man?" The words felt like a fairy tale spell, binding her to a new life she wanted to believe in. Daniel's gaze softened and he whispered, "Always." Cameras flashed, guests cheered, and the kiss sealed more than a marriage. It sealed her faith in a man she barely knew. Later, at the reception, laughter spilled across the hotel ballroom. Guests toasted to forever. Isabel's cousin caught the bouquet. Her mother wiped tears of joy. Isabel looked around, overwhelmed with gratitude. Everything felt perfect, maybe too perfect. Daniel leaned in, brushing her cheek. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Hart," he murmured. She blushed, the title warming her heart. For a moment, she believed the world had finally stopped spinning against her. But perfection has cracks, tiny, invisible ones that only appear in silence. That night, after the guests had left and the suite filled with soft music, Isabel found Daniel sitting on the balcony, phone in hand. He looked startled when she stepped in. "Work call," he said quickly, locking the screen. The glow from the phone reflected briefly in his eyes, enough for Isabel to catch a glimpse of a name before it vanished. "Cal?" Then the screen went black. "Already?" she asked softly. "It's our wedding night." Daniel smiled faintly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Just business, sweetheart. Don't worry." She nodded, though something heavy settled inside her chest. She told herself she was overthinking. He was a good man, a hard-working one. But as she lay beside him, staring at the city lights outside, a single thought began to whisper in her mind. Why delete a work message so fast? She tried to dismiss it, tried to focus on the rhythm of his breathing beside her. Yet even as sleep tugged at her eyes, the echo of that deleted name lingered like static in the dark. At dawn, Isabel woke alone. Daniel's side of the bed was cold. From the balcony came the faint murmur of another call, hushed and urgent. Her new husband was already dressed, phone to his ear. "Yes, I'll see you soon," he said. Then a pause. "Don't call me until I'm back." He turned and smiled when he noticed her watching. "Morning, love. Just sorting out the honeymoon bookings." Isabel forced a smile, her fingers curling around the bedsheet. Outside, the sun climbed over Manila Bay, bright and blinding. It was supposed to be the first day of forever. But for Isabel Cruz, it was the first day of the end. The morning after the wedding felt colder than Isabel expected. The hotel curtains fluttered softly, the scent of lilies from the bouquet still hanging faintly in the air. Daniel hummed as he packed his things, saying he had to make a few calls before they left for their honeymoon in Palawan. She smiled, pretending not to mind. She wanted to believe this was normal, that new husbands sometimes worked even on their first day of marriage. But that whisper from last night, "Don't call me until I'm back," refused to die in her head. Their honeymoon started beautifully. White sand, blue skies, laughter echoing in the open air. Daniel took hundreds of photos of them, posting each one with captions like, "My forever Filipina queen." The comments flooded in. Isabel read them all, feeling proud, until she noticed one reaction that stood out. A simple red heart from an account named CT. It wasn't much, but something about it made her skin prickle. That night, while Daniel showered, she stared at his phone lying face down on the bedside table. Her hands shook. She didn't want to be that kind of wife, the suspicious one. But curiosity is a quiet poison, and hers had already begun to spread. She reached out, unlocked the screen with his fingerprint while whispering, "I just need to know." A list of messages appeared. Most were harmless: coworkers, travel agents, clients. But one thread was saved under the name Carl T. The first few lines looked like friendly work talk. Then she scrolled up. "Miss you today. You promised you'd tell her after the wedding. I can still smell your cologne on me." Isabel's throat tightened. The messages were dated only 2 nights ago. She dropped the phone, heart racing. The shower water stopped. She quickly placed the phone back and forced herself to breathe. Daniel emerged, towel slung around his waist, smiling as if nothing in the world could go wrong. "You okay, babe? You look pale." "Just tired," she murmured, forcing a smile. He pulled her close, his damp skin warm against her trembling hands. She wanted to push him away, to scream, but instead she leaned into his chest, eyes open, staring past him. Over the next few days, Isabel tried to bury the truth. She told herself maybe Carl T. really was just a friend. Maybe she'd misunderstood. But late at night, Daniel's phone would buzz, and he'd step out to the balcony to whisper in the dark. Once, she followed quietly, pressing her ear against the glass door. "I can't talk right now," Daniel said, voice low. "You know she's right here." A soft laugh answered from the other end, faint, feminine. "Then come back to me soon," the voice said before the line cut. The sound pierced Isabel like glass. She spent the next morning pretending everything was fine, ordering breakfast, smiling for photos, wearing the white sundress Daniel said he loved. But inside, her thoughts twisted into something darker. When they returned to their condo in Makati, Isabel's silence grew heavier. Daniel would scroll through his phone, smirking quietly, fingers flying across the screen. She began staying up late, pretending to sleep until she heard him tiptoe into the living room to talk. One night, unable to stop herself, she checked his phone again. The contact Carl T. had changed to Calvin Tech. The messages were still there, only now the tone was desperate. "You said 9 days. I'm waiting." "She doesn't deserve you." Isabel's breath hitched. 9 days. The same number since their wedding. She deleted the evidence, placed the phone back, and stared at the dark ceiling until dawn. The word waiting kept echoing in her skull, hollow and cold. When Daniel woke, she smiled as if nothing had happened. "Coffee?" she asked sweetly. He kissed her cheek, unaware that she had already memorized every word of his betrayal. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, beating against the glass like a warning. Isabel stood by the window, eyes fixed on the gray skyline. Somewhere in that downpour, something inside her quietly snapped. Clarice Torres loved mornings, the kind painted in coffee steam and city noise. She sat by her apartment window in Makati, silk robe draped over her shoulder, legs curled beneath her as she scrolled through Daniel's latest honeymoon photo. The caption read, "My heart, my wife." She smirked, twirling a spoon in her cup. "Your heart, huh?" she murmured. The bitterness in her tone matched the taste of her coffee. Clarice had known Daniel long before the wedding, back when he was just a foreign engineer managing a construction project where she worked as a site coordinator. Their flirtation began with small talk, then private lunches, and eventually hotel rooms that smelled of guilt and perfume. He had promised he'd leave the online girl when the project ended. But he didn't. He married her instead. Still, Daniel hadn't cut her off. The night before his wedding, he'd called Clarice, whispering, "After the ceremony, I'll fix everything. Just trust me." She had. And now, 9 days later, she was done waiting. Her phone buzzed, a new message from Carl T., the same alias he used to hide her. "Daniel, soon. She's suspicious. Don't message me again until I say." Clarice rolled her eyes. "Suspicious? Of course she's suspicious," she said aloud, tossing her phone onto the couch. Her reflection in the window stared back, sharp, beautiful, and furious. To most people, Clarice was confident, ambitious, irresistible. But underneath that poise lay something fragile. She had spent years being the woman in the shadows, always promised love that never stayed. Daniel was supposed to be different. She'd convinced herself he loved her, that he just needed time. She reached for her journal, the one she used instead of therapy, and began to write. He can't just walk away. He belongs to me. I gave him everything. As she wrote, tears smeared the ink. She laughed at herself bitterly. Pathetic, she whispered, snapping the notebook shut. That evening, Daniel called. His voice was hushed, tired. Clarice, please, not now. I told you, I'm working this out. How long? She asked coldly. You think I'll wait forever? She's posting you all over social media like a trophy. Do you know what that looks like for me? I'll see you soon, he said, tone clipped, ending the call before she could reply. Clarice hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall, leaving a small crack, just like the one spreading inside her chest. She sat there in silence, breathing hard. Then, slowly, an idea began to form. Her anger wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was purpose. She opened her laptop and searched Daniel's new address, the condo he now shared with Isabel. The location appeared within seconds. Clarice smiled faintly. Congratulations, Mrs. Hart, she whispered. Let's see how perfect your marriage really is. The next day, she sent an anonymous message to Isabel's social account. No words, just a photo of Daniel's hand holding hers from weeks before, their wedding rings gleaming under hotel lights. Then she waited. Hours later, Daniel texted again. Why did you do that? She saw it. Clarice typed slowly, deliberately. Good. Now she knows what you're hiding. There was no reply. She tossed her phone aside, exhaling deeply, satisfied yet hollow. Outside her window, the city lights flickered like a warning. Somewhere out there, Isabel Cruz was staring at that same photo, her hands shaking, her mind unraveling. Clarice closed her eyes, unaware she had just lit the first spark of a fire that would consume them all. The photo arrived just after midnight. Isabel had been half asleep when her phone buzzed on the bedside table. At first, she ignored it, until the glow of the screen refused to fade. One image. No caption. Just Daniel's hand, unmistakable with its gold band, intertwined with another woman's. Her body went cold. The room seemed to tilt. For a long moment, she simply stared, her breathing shallow. Then she looked toward Daniel, asleep beside her, face relaxed in innocence that no longer looked real. By dawn, the silence between them had turned to glass, thin, sharp, ready to shatter. Isabel cooked breakfast the way she always did, humming faintly, every movement mechanical. Daniel joined her at the table, scrolling through his phone, pretending not to notice her tremors. You're quiet, he said, not looking up. I didn't sleep much, she answered. Her voice was steady, almost calm, but her hands shook as she poured his coffee. He reached for her hand. You know, you worry too much. Everything's fine. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile people wear before breaking. Is it? Daniel frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Her phone lay face up on the table. She turned it toward him, the image glowing between them. His hand in another's. Silence filled the room like smoke. He stared for a beat too long before exhaling. This again, he muttered. Isabel, it's just an old picture. From before us. It was sent last night. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're reading into everything. You're being paranoid. She laughed, soft but bitter. Paranoid. That's your word for me now. He pushed away from the table. I can't do this every day. You have to trust me. Trust, she said quietly. You deleted your messages, changed her name, lied about where you go at night. You think I don't see it? Daniel turned sharply, his voice low. You're imagining things, Isabel. You always twist everything. Her eyes filled, not from weakness but fury. Stop lying to me. He stepped closer, his tone softening. Listen, babe. You've been under a lot of stress lately. New marriage, new life. Maybe talk to someone, okay? The words hit harder than any slap. Talk to someone. As if she were broken. As if her pain was insanity. Daniel left soon after, slamming the door. The sound echoed through the apartment long after he was gone. For hours, Isabel sat in silence, replaying the argument, the gaslighting, the fake tenderness. By evening, the lights of the city blurred beyond the window. Her chest felt hollow, her mind spiraling between disbelief and rage. She picked up her phone and called the only person who might understand, her childhood friend, Moritz. "ISA? What's wrong?" came the sleepy voice on the other end. Isabel hesitated, then whispered, "I think he's cheating. I have proof." Moritz sighed softly. "You're sure? I saw the messages. The photo. He keeps lying." A pause, then Moritz said gently, "Then you need to decide, will you leave him, or will you make him tell the truth?" "I don't know," Isabel murmured, staring at the faint reflection of herself in the window. "I just feel like I'm losing my mind." "Don't let him make you feel crazy," her friend said. "You're not." After the call ended, Isabel sat alone in the dark, replaying every detail, every smile, every word, every deleted message. Her love was turning into something she didn't recognize. Sharp, trembling, dangerous. When Daniel returned past midnight, smelling faintly of perfume, she didn't ask where he'd been. She just watched him from the bed, eyes open, heart racing, memorizing every move. He slid beside her, whispering, "Good night, love." She didn't answer. The faint city lights flickered across his sleeping face, the same face she'd once trusted with her whole life. And as she lay awake, Isabel realized something terrifying. Trust wasn't the foundation of their marriage anymore. It was the weapon. The next morning, Isabel moved like a ghost through the condo, quiet, deliberate, hollow-eyed. Daniel was humming in the shower, the sound grating against her chest. His phone lay charging on the counter, screen dark, secrets buried just beneath the glass. She didn't touch it this time. She didn't need to. The scent of another woman's perfume on his shirt was answer enough. When he left for a meeting, Isabel waited 5 minutes before following. She threw on a black coat, tied her hair back, and called a cab. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared the driver could hear it. "Where to, ma'am?" She gave Daniel's office address, then watched as his car turned not toward the city center, but toward a hotel by the bay. Her throat tightened. "Change of plans," she whispered. "Follow that car." The taxi moved quietly through traffic, the wipers scraping against the windshield as rain began to fall. Daniel's vehicle pulled into the covered driveway of the Polview Hotel, a place known for business conferences and discreet affairs. Isabel's nails dug into her palms. She paid the driver and waited, watching from behind a column. A woman stepped out of a red sedan moments later, tall, poised, her hair cascading in loose waves. Even from a distance, Isabel recognized her from that photo. Close. She laughed at something Daniel said, brushing his arm with practiced familiarity. They disappeared through the revolving doors together. For a long moment, Isabel couldn't move. Then something inside her snapped into focus, cold, sharp, merciless. She walked into the lobby, her heels echoing across the marble floor. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the receptionist greeted. "I'm meeting Mr. Hart," Isabel said smoothly, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "He just checked in." The woman smiled politely. "Do you have a room number?" Isabel hesitated. "Not yet," she murmured, turning away before the receptionist could ask more. She scanned the mirrored walls, catching the reflection of Daniel and Clarice stepping into the elevator at the far end. The doors slid shut before she could reach them, but not before she saw Clarice's hand resting on his chest, fingers tracing the fabric of his shirt. Isabel stood there for nearly an hour, pretending to wait for someone, her phone clutched tight. Every time the elevator chimed, she lifted her head, hoping it would be them. Finally, the doors opened, and Daniel and Clarice emerged, laughing softly, their clothes slightly rumpled. They walked past her without noticing, too absorbed in each other to see the wife standing only feet away. Her breath caught. The world narrowed into one long, soundless moment. When they left through the lobby doors, Isabel followed again, just far enough to watch them kiss beneath the awning before parting ways. Clarice drove off first. Daniel stayed a few minutes longer, adjusting his tie in the glass reflection, then walked to his car. Isabel lifted her phone, recording every second through the rain-smeared window. The trembling of her hand was almost invisible. The lens captured everything, the deceit, the touch, the smile that wasn't hers anymore. She didn't confront him that night. She said nothing when he returned home, dripping from the rain, muttering about work delays. She simply nodded, served him dinner, and let him kiss her cheek. Later, while he slept, she sat in the dark watching the video on repeat. Her face was expressionless, her eyes dry. Each time she replayed it, her heart felt lighter, not in relief, but in a strange, detached calm. At 3 a.m., she wrote a single line in her diary, "He doesn't know what I know." Then she closed it, placed her phone beside it, and turned off the lamp. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, echoing through the quiet apartment like a warning. 9 days had passed since their wedding. 9 days since she'd believed in love. The morning after the hotel, Isabel woke before sunrise. The rain had stopped, but the city still smelled of storm, wet asphalt, rust, and something faintly metallic. Daniel was asleep beside her, mouth slightly open, breathing deep and even. She watched him for a long time, the steady rhythm of his chest mocking her own restless heart. 9 days. That's all it had taken for everything she believed in to collapse. 9 days since the vows, since forever. The irony of it made her almost laugh. She slipped quietly from bed, tying her robe as she moved into the kitchen. The condo felt different now, colder, emptier. She placed a pot of coffee on the stove, the hiss and pop of heat filling the silence. Her reflection in the glass cabinet startled her. She looked like a stranger, calm eyes, unshaken expression. Grief had burned itself into something colder. When Daniel finally stirred, she was already serving breakfast. "Morning," she greeted softly, her tone smooth as still water. He smiled, sitting down, oblivious. "Morning, love. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." She placed his cup before him, her hand steady as she poured coffee. His favorite, sweetened with a dash of caramel syrup. "You've been working too much," she added. He shrugged, sipping slowly. "Just the new project. Things should settle soon." She smiled faintly. "I'm sure they will." He didn't notice her eyes following the cup to his lips, or how her gaze lingered a second too long. A soft clink of porcelain, a sigh of steam, and silence filled the table again. When he left for work, she remained seated, staring at the half-empty cup. The powder had dissolved perfectly. Just a mild sedative, nothing dangerous yet. Just enough to make him sleep deeply tonight. Enough for her to think. All day, Isabel moved through her routines with eerie precision. She cleaned, cooked, even sang softly while folding laundry. On the surface, everything looked normal. Inside, her mind mapped every step she would take next. At dusk, she sat by the window as the city lights flickered awake. A message lit her phone, an unknown number. Her heart clenched. "He told me he's leaving you tonight." No name. No greeting. Just that. She knew who it was. Course. For a long moment, Isabel stared at the screen, expression unreadable. Then slowly she smiled. It wasn't a bitter smile, nor a broken one, just calm, quiet understanding. She typed a reply, "Thank you for telling me." Then she deleted it before sending. Daniel came home around 9, humming to himself, a faint smell of whiskey and perfume clinging to his shirt. "Had a long day," he said, slipping his arms around her waist. She turned, returning the embrace. "You should rest," she murmured. "Everything's taken care of." Later, when he fell asleep almost instantly, Isabel sat at the edge of the bed, watching him breathe. The sedatives had worked. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, her touch soft, almost affectionate. On the dresser, her phone camera blinked silently, recording. She whispered, "9 days, Daniel. That's all you gave me." Her tone was gentle, but her eyes were hollow. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the glittering skyline. The city never slept, and neither would she, not until it was finished. Tomorrow, she decided, she would stop pretending. The night began quietly, the way disasters often do. The air outside was still, thick with the smell of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Isabel stood by the window, watching the reflection of the city lights dance across the glass. Behind her, Daniel slept heavily, his breath deep and slow, the sedatives working their quiet magic. On the table beside the bed sat her phone, its screen glowing faintly. She replayed the video she'd recorded earlier, Daniel lying there, unaware, while she whispered the words that had burned inside her for days. 9 days, Daniel. That's all you gave me. She closed the video, placed the phone down, and turned toward the mirror. Her face looked calm, even beautiful in the low light. But her eyes told another story, sharp, deliberate, haunted. Tonight was not about rage. It was about release. At 11:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. A message. I'm here. Close. Isabel exhaled, slow and steady. Everything had led to this. The texts. The lies. The little humiliations Daniel thought she never noticed. The scent of another woman on his clothes. The hotel room he thought she'd never find. She'd known for weeks. And now, she was ready to end it. She slipped on her coat, the black silk one Daniel had bought her for their honeymoon. She looked at him one last time, motionless, peaceful, utterly vulnerable. Goodbye, my love, she whispered, pressing her lips to his forehead. Then she walked out. The hallway was empty, the air humming faintly from the old building's heating vents. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she made her way to the elevator. She could feel her pulse in her throat, a steady rhythm counting down to something inevitable. Outside, the street was drenched in amber light. Across the road, parked under a flickering lamp, sat a white sedan. Clarice stepped out, wearing a long coat and trembling slightly. Where is he? She asked, her voice thin, uncertain. Inside, Isabel replied. Sleeping. Clarice hesitated. You said? I said we'd talk. And we will. They stood there in silence for a moment, two women bound by the same man's betrayal. Clarice's eyes darted toward the building, then back to Isabel. You don't have to do anything crazy. He's leaving you, yes, but... Isabel's laugh was soft, almost kind. Leaving me? She shook her head slowly. He already did. The moment he touched you. Clarice swallowed, stepping back slightly. Isabel, please. But Isabel was already walking toward the door, gesturing for her to follow. You deserve to see what love looks like when it burns. Clarice hesitated, then followed. Inside the apartment, everything looked eerily calm, candles flickering on the kitchen counter, a faint scent of lavender in the air. Daniel was still asleep in the bedroom. What did you give him? Clarice whispered. Peace, Isabel replied. She moved to the counter and picked up a lighter. The blue flame flickered to life, small and trembling. Do you know what happens when you trap lies long enough? She asked. They ignite. Clarice backed away, panic rising in her voice. You're insane. Maybe, Isabel said softly. But at least I'm honest about it. She turned, eyes shining in the candlelight, and dropped the lighter onto the soaked curtains. The flames caught instantly, crawling upward, licking the walls with greedy hunger. Clarice screamed, rushing toward the door, but the smoke was already thick, filling the room with heat and chaos. Isabel didn't move. She stood still, her face glowing orange, watching the fire consume everything. The photos, the furniture, the bed where Daniel still lay. Outside, sirens began to wail in the distance. Clarice stumbled out into the street, coughing, crying, her voice hoarse as she shouted for help. And Isabel, she walked calmly through the back exit, her coat trailing behind her like a shadow. She didn't look back. Not once. By the time the building exploded in a bloom of red and gold, she was already gone, vanishing into the night like a ghost. The fire department would later find 2 sets of fingerprints, one on the lighter and one on the doorknob. They would find Daniel's ring fused to a melted frame, and a single line in the ash near the window, her handwriting burned into the wall, "Love never dies. It only changes form." Far from the flames, Isabel watched from a hill overlooking the city, the fire reflecting in her eyes like sunrise. She whispered to herself, "Now it begins." The morning after the fire, the city smelled of smoke and ash. The streets were cordoned off with yellow tape, police officers and firefighters moving in disciplined chaos around the skeletal remains of what had once been Daniel and Isabel's condo. The building was gutted, blackened, windows shattered, curtains fused to the walls like twisted memories. Detective Reyes arrived just as the first reporters began shouting questions, cameras flashing like tiny intrusive stars. He surveyed the scene carefully, noting the obvious: 2 bodies, partially burned, identification uncertain. But something didn't fit. "Why is the lighter found near the curtains?" he muttered to himself. "Too obvious." He crouched, examining the ash-covered floor, his gloved hands sifting through debris. Among the blackened fragments of furniture, he found a single sheet of paper, partially burned but legible. A line scrawled in thick, deliberate handwriting: "Love never dies. It only changes form." His jaw tightened. Whoever wrote this had planned it meticulously, or wanted it to look like they had. Across the street, neighbors whispered, pointing toward the hilltop where the fire had been visible. "Did you see her leave?" one woman asked. "The wife? She ran down the alley." "I swear I saw her." Reyes filed it mentally. Eyewitnesses often saw shadows in the chaos. But the possibility that someone had escaped the inferno added a dangerous angle to the case. Inside the building, the forensic team worked silently, lifting charred fragments and bagging evidence. One officer called out, "Detective, you'll want to see this." Reyes approached. A half-melted wedding ring, fused to the corner of a photo frame, glinted under the flashlight. Nearby, there were traces of powdered residue, possibly sedatives. "Interesting," Reyes murmured. "This wasn't just an accident. Someone planned it." He thought back to the weeks leading up to the fire. A marriage that seemed perfect, yet riddled with tension. Texts disappearing, late-night calls, a mysterious woman. Daniel's betrayal. The other woman. And the bride, Isabel? Or the person who had carried herself through the night of fire with calm determination? Outside, reporters were gathering around, capturing live footage. 2 dead in Makati apartment fire. The headline screamed, "Bride allegedly involved?" Reyes ignored them, focusing on the inconsistencies. Daniel's phone had been destroyed, but a backup could still exist. And the lighter, found where it would be seen, was a signature, a message from someone clever enough to control the narrative. He paused near the staircase, eyes tracing the burnt edges of the walls. The lines written in ash suggested more than just vengeance. They hinted at intelligence, cold calculation. Someone had wanted this fire to send a message, to erase the past and leave witnesses with a story of horror and poetry intertwined. Reyes made a mental note to interview Clarice next. She had escaped, terrified and coughing, but alive. Her statements could unravel the events, if she spoke truthfully. Yet deep down, Reyes suspected the truth was far darker than anyone imagined. The bride wasn't just a victim or a grieving widow. The way she had planned, observed, and executed the fire suggested a mind unbroken by betrayal, one sharpened by it. As the morning sun rose over the city, the smoke cleared in streaks of gray, revealing the skeleton of the building and the chaos left behind. And somewhere, far from the scene, Isabel watched the news coverage from a quiet apartment, sipping black coffee, expression unreadable. Every headline, every flashing camera, every report of the investigation filled her with a quiet satisfaction. She had vanished, leaving only ashes and lies behind. Detective Reyes sat in the dimly lit office, the hum of the ceiling fan above him filling the silence. The morning after the fire had brought chaos to the city, but now, in the quiet, he reviewed the evidence he had gathered, melted fragments of furniture, a partially burned lighter, and witness statements from Clarice, whose hands still shook as she recounted the events. His eyes narrowed on the USB drive recently recovered from the ash-littered bedroom, something that had gone unnoticed in the initial sweep. He held it carefully, fingers gloved, almost reverently. Inside, it was a single file labeled truth.mp4. He hesitated before pressing play. The video opened to reveal Isabel Cruz, seated in her condo before the fire, camera focused on her face, eyes cold yet calm. She looked directly into the lens, not addressing anyone but somehow speaking to every viewer, every conscience. "My name is Isabel Cruz," she began, voice steady, almost rehearsed. "You will call me a widow, a victim, maybe a killer. But you will never understand what I endured. 9 days. 9 days of lies, deceit, and betrayal. I loved him more than I should have, and he threw it away. And her eyes flicked slightly, not needing to name Clarice. She thought she was the other woman. But the other woman is only half the story." Reyes leaned forward, absorbing every word. The camera didn't flinch. She recounted each detail with chilling clarity. Daniel's late-night calls, deleted messages, the hotel rendezvous, every act meticulously observed, every betrayal noted. The tape continued, documenting her preparations, the sedatives mixed in his coffee, the route she had taken to the Pulview Hotel, even the lighter left as a signature in the apartment. "You will never see me cry," Isabel said, voice almost tender now. "You will see only what I allowed you to see. And if you think I regret any of it, think again. Justice is more than the law. Justice is truth." Reyes paused the video, rubbing his temples. The level of planning, the cold logic, was terrifying. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a crime of precision, emotional calculus, and calculated rage. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The confession tape confirmed everything he had suspected, but also introduced a terrifying new dimension. She wasn't finished. Her words had a cadence of control, of someone who had foreseen every step the investigators would take. Then the tape resumed. Isabel's voice softened. "I am not proud, but I am honest. I loved and I was betrayed. And now, everything that belonged to him, everything he cherished, has burned with the fire of truth. If you think you can find me, know this, I am always 2 steps ahead." The tape ended abruptly. Silence filled the office, heavy and oppressive. Reyes placed the USB drive on his desk, staring at it like it was a living, breathing entity. He knew then that the investigation would be more than just a search for bodies and evidence. It was a hunt for a mind, sharp, unrepentant, and fully aware of its own power. Every plan, every lie, every manipulation Isabel had orchestrated was documented on that single tape. Clarice had been a witness, but her fear and confusion made her unreliable. The tape, however, was irrefutable. Isabel's calm voice, her meticulous recounting of events, left no doubt. She had engineered every step, and she had done it with precision only a calculating mind could sustain. Reyes sat back, rubbing his face. He understood now why she had disappeared so completely after the fire. She had vanished, yes, but her presence lingered, like smoke that refused to settle, like a warning written in fire and blood. Outside the office window, Manila's cityscape glittered innocently, unaware of the darkness lurking beneath its lights. And in the quiet room, Detective Reyes realized that catching Isabel Cruz would not just be about following footprints or fingerprints. It would be about anticipating a mind that had already won. The courthouse was packed, the air heavy with anticipation and murmurs. Cameras clicked relentlessly, reporters scribbled notes, and spectators leaned forward in rigid seats, eager for the first glimpse of the woman who had captivated the nation. Isabel Cruz entered calmly, her heels clicking on the polished marble floor, her expression serene, almost indifferent to the chaos around her. Detective Reyes watched from the back, notebook in hand. He had expected rage, panic, maybe even remorse, but none appeared. Isabel's posture was perfect, her face a mask of composed elegance. She walked past reporters without a word, settling at the defense table with an almost imperceptible nod to her attorney. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor's voice was sharp, painting a vivid picture of betrayal, seduction, and a fire that consumed everything, a carefully orchestrated murder. Photographs, charred debris, eyewitness testimonies, every piece of evidence reinforced the narrative of calculated vengeance. Isabel remained silent. She let the words wash over her, occasionally glancing at the jury, her eyes sharp, alert, unafraid. She didn't flinch when the burned remains of Daniel's condo were shown, or when Clarice recounted her terrified escape. Then the defense rose. The attorney's voice was measured, rehearsed, highlighting Daniel's betrayal, the manipulation, and the emotional torment Isabel endured in those 9 days following their wedding. The words struck with unexpected weight, giving the courtroom a glimpse into the psychological fracture of a woman pushed to her limits. When the confession tape was played, silence fell. Isabel had recorded every detail herself, a deliberate narrative of her own making. Her calm voice filled the room, recounting Daniel's lies, Clarice's intrusion, the meticulous planning of the fire, her every word a demonstration of both intellect and cold fury. Some jurors shifted uncomfortably, others leaned closer, captivated. Finally, the prosecution called Isabel to the stand. She approached slowly, dignity intact, each step precise. The courtroom held its collective breath as the questioning began. "Isabel Cruz," the prosecutor said sharply, "do you admit to setting the fire that killed your husband?" Her voice was soft, almost melodic. "Yes, I did." Gasps echoed. Cameras clicked. Murmurs spread. "And why?" he pressed. Her eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "Because the truth was unbearable, and he had left me no choice. I was betrayed, and I witnessed betrayal. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to lose everything he claimed to love. Not just him, but everyone complicit in his lies." The defense attorney rose, adding context. "Your Honor, my client acted out of extreme emotional distress, a response to sustained manipulation and deceit. Her actions, while tragic, were a culmination of psychological trauma inflicted by the victims themselves." During cross-examination, Isabel remained unshaken. Each question, each accusation, was met with a controlled response. She recounted her planning with the same detached tone she had used in the confession tape, precise, unflinching, unervingly calm. By the end of the day, reporters described her as composed, calculating, almost terrifying in her clarity. Some called it genius, others, madness. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, divided between outrage and awe. Isabel exited through a side door, smiling faintly at no one in particular. Her trial had revealed everything, the betrayal, the lies, and the fire. But she remained untouchable in her own mind, a figure simultaneously human and mythic. Detective Reyes watched her go, notebook closed, realizing the danger was not over. The trial had uncovered the truth, yes, but it had also revealed a mind far more dangerous than he had imagined. Isabel Cruz had transformed betrayal into power, and no courtroom, no jury, could diminish the control she had gained over her own story. The cell was small, sterile, and suffocating, a cage of gray walls and narrow light from the high window. Isabel Cruz had been here for months, following the trial that had shocked the nation. Her trial had ended, her sentence pronounced, but the world outside continued to obsess over her story. Inside, time stretched long and heavy, each day a mirror reflecting her own calculated decisions. She sat at the metal desk bolted to the wall, a stack of stationery before her. The pen in her hand moved with the precision of someone who had always controlled her narrative. Every line, every word, was deliberate. Each letter she wrote was a bridge to the world beyond the cell, a subtle manipulation of perception and emotion. "Dear Clarice," one began, her handwriting neat, almost delicate. She paused, tracing the ink with her finger. "I hope this finds you well, though I know our lives will never be normal again. I wonder if you understand the lessons we were forced to learn, about deceit, trust, and the cost of desire." The letters weren't apologies. Nor were they confessions beyond what the trial had revealed. They were exercises in control, psychological games played across paper and ink. She reminded Clarice of the fire, of Daniel's betrayals, of the choices that had led them all to this point. Each sentence was a subtle assertion. I was never the victim. I orchestrated the truth. Outside the small bars, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Guards passed, conversations carried faintly through the concrete walls, but inside Isabel's cell, silence reigned. She thrived in it, drawing strength from the quiet, letting her mind wander back to the 9 days that had defined her life and the events that had reshaped others. Sometimes, she wrote, the world believes they are in control. But control is an illusion. One can guide, manipulate, and direct outcomes without ever being seen. Her words were almost a warning, a challenge to whoever might read them in the future. She carefully folded the first letter, placing it in an envelope addressed with her precise handwriting. Another followed, this one to Detective Reyes, a thin line of respect mixed with caution. You saw what I did, but you cannot understand why. Perhaps one day you will. As she worked, Isabel's eyes occasionally drifted to the small window high on the wall. Through it, she could see the city she had left behind, sunlight glinting off distant skyscrapers. She didn't long for freedom in the conventional sense. The outside world was chaotic, messy, and unpredictable. Her freedom, she decided, was in the mind, in letters, in observation, in knowing she had outwitted those who had underestimated her. Her letters stacked neatly on the metal desk, each one a thread connecting her to the life she had lost and the control she still possessed. Even behind bars, she was untouchable. At night, Isabel sat on her narrow cot, reading the letters she had written that day. She imagined responses, plotted conversations that might never happen, rehearsed arguments and revelations. The cell was small, but her mind stretched far beyond it. By the time the lights dimmed, her handwriting was finished, the ink dry, and the letters ready for dispatch. She lay back on the cot, hands folded across her chest, eyes staring at the ceiling. The world outside believed it had captured her, subdued her, and judged her. But Isabel knew the truth. She was free, free in shadows, free in thought, free in the letters that carried her presence far beyond the walls of her cell. Months had passed since Isabel Cruz had been locked behind cold steel bars, yet the world outside had not forgotten her. News outlets replayed footage from the trial, highlighting her calm demeanor, her precise planning, her cold confession. Society had labeled her many things: a monster, a mastermind, a betrayed wife who crossed the line. Yet inside, Isabel felt none of these labels applied. She had acted out of clarity, not madness. The cell had become a sanctuary of reflection. Each day followed the rhythm she set: morning exercises, careful maintenance of her small space, hours dedicated to writing letters, and long stretches staring out the high window at the city that seemed both distant and intimately hers. The skyline, shifting with the sun and clouds, reminded her of a world she had shaped with her own hands, even if she could no longer walk freely among it. She often recalled Daniel, the deceit, the lies, the casual betrayals, and Clarice, whose fear had made her vulnerable. And yet, Isabel did not feel satisfaction in their suffering. Instead, there was silence, heavy and hollow, filled with the weight of all that had been lost. Love, once vivid and intoxicating, had evaporated, leaving only calculated memory. One evening, as the prison lights dimmed and the corridors emptied, Isabel sat at her desk with a single candle flickering beside her. She traced words on paper slowly, deliberately. The ink flowed as if guided by the rhythm of her pulse. Her letters now were not just messages, they were chronicles, reminders, and subtle warnings to the outside world. She wrote to Clarice, to her few loyal friends, and even to Detective Reyes, each carefully balancing truth, omission, and insinuation. The night was quiet, almost sacred. Isabel paused, hands resting on the paper, eyes closing. The silence was unlike anything she had known, not fear, not despair, but something deeper, a strange calm born from acceptance. She remembered the fire, the hotel, the 9 days of revelation. Every moment had led her here. Every decision had been hers, and only hers. Occasionally, she imagined conversations with Daniel, hearing the soft lies he would have used to defend himself, the false charm that had once entranced her. She did not rage. She did not cry. She simply acknowledged the echoes of what had been, letting the silence fill the spaces once occupied by love and betrayal. Her letters stacked neatly on the desk, each one a bridge to people she would never see again. They carried her presence, her intellect, and her intent beyond the confines of the cell. And yet, she remained aware of the paradox. The world knew her story, but no one truly knew her mind. No one could anticipate the subtle ways she continued to shape outcomes from within. As the night deepened, Isabel rose, walking slowly to the small window. The city shimmered below, its lights reflecting like fractured stars. She inhaled, the cold air brushing her face, and allowed herself a quiet smile. It was not a smile of joy or triumph. It was the acknowledgement of a mind unbroken, a spirit untamed. The world had tried to define her, to silence her, but she remained free in thought, free in intention. Finally, she returned to her cot, settling beneath the thin blanket. The candle flickered its last, and the cell fell into darkness. In that silence, she found clarity. Love had ended, betrayal had been avenged, and yet life, her life, persisted, measured and deliberate, like the steady tick of a clock no one else could hear. And somewhere in that quiet, Isabel Cruz whispered to herself, a soft, unshakable truth: I am still the one in control. End of story.